BC's education minister has revoked his consent for a proposed law school at Trinity Western University. Of course, this is the university that has become the subject of quite a bit of controversy when it comes to their particular doctrine. It talks about the idea of abstinence, not just for faculty, staff, but also for the students that go there. But this revocation of consent is now drawing new attention. JJ McCullough is here to talk a little bit about this. I don't understand how you can say on one day you're in favor and then one day you're taking that favoritism back, but maybe you can explain it to me.
Well, I mean, basically what happened was that almost exactly a year ago, the government of British Columbia authorized this theoretical school. And this is an important fact to keep in mind as well, is that we're not talking about an actual school that exists. We're talking about a theoretical school that may conceivably exist sometime around 2016. So basically, the government of British Columbia granted the license for this school to begin in about a year ago. And in the aftermath of that, there was, of course, an enormous backlash. You know, the Legal Society of British Columbia held a vote in which all of the lawyers basically said that we won't recognize any graduates from this theoretical future law school because they have to, their students, they're as a condition of enrollment, because it is an evangelical Christian school, they have to sign off on this form that says that they will adhere to Christian values, one of which is that they will abstain from sex outside of marriage. And this has been construed to mean that, that gay students cannot be sexually active whilst going to that school, and therefore that this is some sort of horrible exercise in bigotry. So it's really become this very sort of symbolic, sort of totemic thing that all of sort of right-thinking people rally against in order to increase their sort of own tolerance bona fides. And basically what happened is that this kind of reached such a critical mass that the education minister has now basically said that he cannot, in good conscience, continue to authorize this school going forward when it's the subject not only to so much ambiguity within the legal community, whether or not their grads will actually be recognized, but then there's also been lawsuits about discrimination as well. So basically he's saying that there's just too much uncertainty to grant the accreditation.
Yeah, okay, here's what I don't understand, and I have not understood this since this issue became front page news. I'm a student that wants to go to this you're right, theoretical law school, one that doesn't exist yet, but let's say for the sake of argument it does exist. I want to go there, I sign off on this covenant, I know full well what the stipulations are going in. I'm not there by gunpoint or under duress. I want to go to the school, this is what I want to learn. I want to learn it in a Christian environment. Why is it anybody else's business other than the school and the person that's signing that covenant, that agreement? Anybody outside of it, you're learning the law at the end of the day. I mean, that it's not impacting the teaching of the people that are coming out of this place.
No, absolutely. I mean, you make a number of valid points. I mean, the fact is, at the end of the day, is that gays are not being, rounded up and marched into this school and forced to attend it. They're perfectly able to attend any sort of school that they want, and perhaps a school that's more in line with their particular philosophy. And I speak as a gay man myself. I mean, if I wanted to go to law school, perhaps I wouldn't go there. Perhaps I'd go to a more secular one in which, it would be more in line with my own thinking. But I mean, that is a huge variable as well. But then, of course, it's also the fact, as you raised, is that even if you are privately a horrible, bigoted, homophobic person, I mean, the fact is that we live in a society in which that is not part of Canadian law. I mean, Canadian law, of course, has all sorts of anti-discrimination provisions. We have legal same-sex marriage. And any lawyer worth his salt has to, of course, acknowledge that and exist and practice within a national legal framework that sort of concedes these principles. And actually, it's quite interesting because in 2001, there was actually a similar sort of foofara over Trinity Western's teacher college. And what basically, similar sorts of characters tried to sue them that the code of conduct was discriminatory and yada, yada, yada. And what the Supreme Court ultimately ruled was that it didn't really matter because there was no evidence that suggested that going through a Christian school actually made you a horrible, bigoted teacher, or that, the private beliefs that you may have as an evangelical Christian of the sort that Trinity Western is, culturally inclined towards. There's no evidence that those beliefs necessarily impact your teaching, that there is in fact a separation between private religious belief and public conduct as a public servant.
How is this not being viewed as reverse discrimination then? You're basically saying to this university, you're not allowed to have this belief system until you change. Until you change your belief system, we're going to make sure that we make every effort to make sure that you're not going to open up this law school.
I mean, I think that it's just because we seem to be in a rather sort of post-Christian moment in terms of the ruling class of British Columbia. I mean, you have basically all of the political class, all of the legal class, all of the media class. I mean, all of these very powerful voices are all kind of uniform in their opposition to this place and have been very unrelenting in sort of their ability to target it, in part because this idea of gay rights is now this very, very sort of sacred principle and the great metric in which we use to sort of judge any presence of morality according to the sort of the secular liberal beliefs that sort of dominate now. I mean, one thing that I feel is worth reminding, though, is that this is not really an issue about gay people. It's not an issue about like the existence of gay people or gay students at the school. And in fact, there's no evidence to suggest that any gays have actually been expelled from the school for being gay. The fact is that they have a particular Christian view that you should not have sex outside of marriage, which is it's worth repeating. Like that is just as discriminatory against something like 90% of heterosexual Canadians who have sex outside of marriage. So I mean, it's a particular Christian belief about sexual practice, about sexual conduct and the appropriate realm for sex that really has very little to do with homosexuality one way or another. It's just being inflated as that because, of course, that's the big fashionable issue of the day.
And if you take out the words marriage between man and a woman and you just put in the abstinence issue, I'm not one to sit here and assume that just because you're gay, you automatically have had sex before. You may not. I mean, that's a really distinct possibility, is it not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, and there's lots of gay Christians who, I
Right.
mean, there's apparently been lots of gay Christian students at this very school. And again, like there's no evidence that anybody's ever been expelled for being gay or being who they are. And in fact, there's like this really sort of ridiculous lawsuit that was filed by an openly gay municipal politician some months ago, in which sort of he said that he felt bigoted because if he might want to go to this school, he might feel discriminated against and he might feel uncomfortable, which just really shows how sort of tortured the logic is that you kind of really have to formulate these very convoluted theoretical thought exercises in which a kid who isn't particularly evangelical Christian might not want to go to this school that he probably wouldn't go to anyway. So yeah, it's just this very totemic thing that because it's a small school, it's in a rural community, they believe a sort of style of Christianity that's very unpopular, very unfashionable, that it just sort of seems that the establishment is choosing them to beat up on in order to shore up their own progressive bona fides in the eyes of the broader public.
So when it comes to this particular education minister now revoking the original consent that he gave, is there any way to change it back, to reverse that? Is there anything that's going to make sure that this particular law school gets the go-ahead, gets the green light?
Well, the school is suing the many legal sort of the lawyers associations, not only of British Columbia, but of some of the other provinces as well, that have said that they will not recognize their grads because the school is basically saying that this is in fact religious discrimination. And I mean, again, like they've already won a similar suit in 2001 as over the teacher college situation. So I don't know. They pledged that they see this very much as an offense to their charter rights, and they plan to fight it to the full extent that they're able. So I don't think that this story is going away.
Yeah, nor are people that are willing to complain about this type of thing when ultimately, if they just allowed it, no one would have ever heard anything about this story. Am I wrong about that?
No, it's a very small school. It only has about 3,000 kids, and it's a minority. I mean, like there's not a lot of really hardcore evangelical Christians. So the influence that this has in sort of broader British Columbia society is so exceedingly minimal, as well as just what I said earlier, that there is no evidence that being an evangelical Christian in any way makes you a horrible, bigoted lawyer.
Yeah, and I think at the end of it all, we should do a better job of understanding the differences between us and trying to iron those type of things out, as opposed to just putting blanket bans on things, because it never seems to serve any purpose.
No, absolutely. And it's not really about them at the end of the day. It's about, certain lawyers and people in the media and certain politicians who really want to puff their chests and show how open-minded and how progressive they are, even though that in doing so, they're revealing their own bigotries.
JJ, always a pleasure. We appreciate it.